Chapter 4. Belfast, Tuesday, April 2, 1912, 3:30 p.m. It had once been a printer's shop. The ink-stained tables, metal rollers, and loose type attested to that. But to Paddy and Daniel, it was home. This was not due to the comforts. There were none. It was because the missing bricks in the wall outside provided the footholds to climb to the fire stairs, which rendered convenient access to the loose board covering what had once been a window. The palace gate, they called it. The shop was no palace, but it was shelter from cold and damp weather. And it was a place of their own, which was more than two destitute street youths had any right to expect. One feature of the print shop was a large stack of paper, very dusty, but only slightly yellowed. Daniel was always sketching. In a different world, Paddy was certain, his friend would have become a famous inventor or designer. Right now, Daniel was completely focused on his promise to Thomas Andrews. He was going to dream up a way for the unsinkable Titanic to sink, or he was going to die trying. For the past 5 days, he had thought of little else. At 8 o'clock tonight, the great ship was scheduled to leave Belfast for Southampton, England, the starting point of her much-anticipated maiden voyage. Mr. Andrews would be sailing with her. In all likelihood, if Daniel could not come up with something before then, he would never see the man again. Paddy could not quite grasp what fascinated his friend to the point of obsession. "It's a boat, Daniel. If you put a hole in the bottom, it'll sink." "Are you forgetting the watertight compartments?" Daniel challenged, reaching for one of the many drawings that covered the old editor's table. This one showed Titanic's long hull divided by 15 transverse bulkheads. "It doesn't matter where the breach is. The captain has only to close the 2 doors around it to contain the water. Mr. Andrews said she could stay afloat with any 4 of those compartments flooded." Paddy shrugged. "It seems simple to me. Flood 5. Daniel shook his head. "It would never happen. A steamship isn't like a locomotive that can travel 60 miles an hour." He indicated another sketch, this one of the Titanic striking a sister ship broadside. "Even a full-speed collision with another vessel would flood only 1 compartment, perhaps 2. Paddy looked thoughtful. "Maybe your precious Titanic isn't the one doing the hitting. What if some other big boat runs into it?" "Her," Daniel corrected. "It would be the same. The other ship's prow would damage 1, maybe 2 compartments, but no more." He looked frustrated. "And there's the double hull. Even if a boiler explodes, it wouldn't break through both of them. A fire on board might do a lot of damage, but it wouldn't burn through heavy-gauge metal." Paddy put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "If it was easy, your friend Mr. Andrews would have thought of it already. But you're smarter than any starched-up dandy. You'll figure it out. Now let's go put our bellies around some food. The meat pies should be going onto the sill at Odell's just about now." Not even the promise of a savory meal could wrest Daniel from his sketching. "I'll go later," he said absently. "And remember, don't spend those banknotes." Paddy cast him a cheeky grin. "Spend? When's the last time you saw me pay for what I eat?" And he was over the sill and out the window. It almost didn't count as stealing with Mrs. Odell anymore. Ever since Paddy had chased that huge rat out of her larder, she'd looked the other way every time he helped himself to one of her Cornish pasties. If he ever got rich, he would pay Mrs. Odell back for every single one he had nicked. He walked along St. Bart's Street, gazing idly into the shop windows and licking his fingers. Daniel didn't know what he was missing. Who would pass up a full stomach to spend the day staring at diagrams of a boat? Sometimes the smart people seemed more stupid than the dullards. But, he reflected with pride, if anybody could come up with a way to sink Thomas Andrews' unsinkable boat, it would be Daniel. Walking past the window of a stationer's shop, he saw a gorgeous milk-white drawing pad with a complete set of pencils, ink pens, and charcoals of every imaginable thickness. Why, armed with this, Daniel could design a way to scuttle the entire Royal Navy. A small card beside the display announced that the price of this kit was 3 crowns 6pence. It was more money than Paddy had ever touched in his life, except for the gold clip he'd taken from the man in the houndstooth cloak. Why, with that windfall, he could afford a dozen of these kits and have change left over. He was on the point of running back to where they'd stashed the gold clip when he stopped in his tracks. Daniel had made him promise not to spend any of those banknotes. But what was the point of having money if you could never spend it? No point at all. And Daniel would forgive him when he saw the wondrous gift he was getting. Paddy ran to the hiding place and found the stash safe and sound. He plucked a single crisp note out of the clip and knew a moment of temptation. If it was a good thing to purchase this for Daniel, perhaps it made sense to buy each of them a new suit of clothes. If they weren't dressed so shabbily, no one would be suspicious of the money they spent, and they could get closer to a better quality of pocket if they weren't always being chased away as ragamuffins. No, he decided. Just buy the kit. Leave the rest of the money here. He headed back toward the stationer's. As morning became afternoon, Daniel began to regret passing up the meat pie. A fellow couldn't very well think on an empty stomach. The lines of his Titanic drawings were starting to unravel and dance before his eyes. It was not going well. Either that, or Mr. Andrews really had designed an unsinkable ship. Daniel reached for a fresh pencil, accidentally scraping his arm against a patch of splintered wood on the old table. Ow! He examined the damage. An angry red scratch stretched from his wrist to his elbow. Suddenly, the answer was right in front of him. He was assuming it would take a spectacular crash to sink a mighty ship like the Titanic. But maybe he was approaching the whole problem the wrong way. His skin had barely touched that splintered wood, and yet it had left a wound along the entire length of his forearm. Could the same thing happen to an ocean liner? Not a devastating collision, but a sideswipe that opened a long breach extending through several of her watertight compartments. She could float with damage to 4, but what if it was 5 or 10 or all 16? She would sink, that's what. He began to sketch with a new energy and excitement. When he was finished with his diagram, he wrote his name and the date across the top. He couldn't wait to explain his theory to Paddy. Yet the urge to show it to the designer of the Titanic himself was almost a physical pain. He had to get this drawing in front of Thomas Andrews before the shipbuilder's magnificent creation bore him halfway around the world.